Which brings me to my next story. This one's crazy, man. Did you see this video? Portland driver confronted by armed group in broad daylight. Shocking video shows. You guys see this one?
No.
Portland. There was a group of armed leftists patrolling streets and blocking roads. These aren't protesters holding hands and holding up banners. Literally, this is a guy with full blackout gear and body armor with an AR-15 and I think one other guy. And they're blocking cars, smashing windows and pepper spraying people. One guy gets up on, he opens his door and he's standing up on his truck with the door open with his hand on his hip, and he draws his gun. He's holding it low, ready. And the Antifa guys immediately pull their guns, start pointing their guns at him, yelling him, stop. They're blocking the road. All right. At some point, he gets out of his car and he actually draws on one of these guys. They tackle him, take his weapon. Nothing. No, the cops are like,
what was the purpose?
The purpose is that far left, the far left extremists are getting more militant. And
but were they protecting anything or just arbitrarily
taking control?
Okay.
It's patrol. It's not a protest.
Patrol.
It is. When you march around with guns, shutting things down, shutting down streets, smashing windows and attacking people. I mean, maybe we shouldn't even call that a patrol. We should call it like an insurgency. Attacking civilians in their cars. No joke. And there's another video right now. We can't show this. I think it's out of Chicago. I'm not sure. Was that Chicago, that video that I sent you?
Which one? Oh, I'm not sure.
There's
context.
It might be New York. It might be Chicago. There's a bunch of protesters in the streets, like they've been doing with impunity, and a car just slams the gas. When the car starts pulling up, we're seeing this more and more and more. The far left will go around it and start banging on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, these people are nuts. But because there's never been any real legal ramification, they're not going to sit there and keep doing it. Well, this person in the car said, screw it, slam the gas. And it's a shocking video. Normally when you see these videos where they're like, a car plows through protesters, it's like an SUV going like a mile an hour and they're screaming and yelling and then it just slowly drives away. Nah, this one was somebody hit the gas and people went boom, boom, boom. That's what's going to happen. Because you see what happens in Portland with this video. I don't think they have any, Fox News show. So they show a little bit. I can't show too much. But we've got a tweet. You can see here's the guys wearing, it looks like it might be body armor. It might be actually a tactical vest with like a camelback or something. I don't know for sure. And they're holding some AR-15s pointing at a regular old guy. You know, I thought I was going to predict this, but I said it was going to be far right, locking down streets and telling people to F off and get out of their towns. And that's probably stupid because we know the far left has been increasingly violent, and the escalation has come from them, not conservatives or rural folk. But so here we are.
I got to say, I'm almost shocked that the right-wing response hasn't been more ferocious and quicker, to be honest. And I'm thankful for that because I don't think it's going to do any good except just escalate the kind of civil war, which I think any sane person would want to de-escalate. But it's unbelievable, like the level to which this has gotten. And I think there's a lot of, like I wonder what the heck our society has done to allow some of these young people who are out there blocking cars, antagonizing people,
smashing windows.
All of this. But I'm not just blaming the people doing that. I mean, obviously they're wrong for doing that. But it's like, how have we, and this maybe as I'm getting older and that I have kids now, I'm feeling this way where I'm like, how have we as a society failed these kids so much that this is where we're at? And I think there's a lot to be said there. And then also, I can't believe that there's so much restraint on the other side that there aren't more people just plowing them down.
Well, the social pressure on social media, they're going through their feeds and they, like these campaigns that are going on. I mean, I'm not on Instagram, but like there's all this pressure to do certain posts and like it's insane. Yeah,
everybody make your post a blank screen onto your Instagram to show you're in line with.
And if you don't,
but look, I'm just saying, like you can like hate Antifa and just talk about how awful they are, and I agree. I'm not saying you're wrong to do that. I mean, these are like punk kids who are being destructive and just barbaric, and it's awful. But if you zoom out a little bit, you're like, wow, we really did like create a society where there are these kids where there's like no Like there's no religion in our society. There's no values that replaced that. No discipline. They're growing up in single mother households. They're medicated from the time they're young. They're pushed into these universities that don't prepare them for any type of jobs and just saddle them with all of this debt. It's just there's nothing. You can never buy. You come out of. Imagine being one of these young kids who comes out of a university. You've been fed this far left wing propaganda. You're now $100,000 in debt. What prospects do you ever have to like get married, have kids, and take care of a family? You could never afford a house. You're going to go work at Starbucks and try to pay your $100,000
They feel like
debt
this
off.
is their value system.
Well,
it is their value system.
No,
that's why it's a cult.
The problem is much of what you said, but also consider that these are people growing up in the wealthiest conditions in human history.
Well, I'm not denying that, right? So you're right.
But look, in the 1700s, even if you were wealthy, you still understood some hardship. The old saying is that a poor person today has better dental care than Rockefeller did at the turn of the 1900s because technology improved things. So if you were a rich person in the 1700s, you still needed to understand some basic things. And so the gap between you and the poor, while what may have been dramatic for the time, is insanely different from today.
So you're absolutely right. They're wealthier than kings were at a certain point in time, right? But what I'm talking about is something separate from wealth. What I'm talking about is, look, my grandfather was far poorer than any of us are today and suffered through more hardships than any of us could imagine. I mean, he was a Jew who escaped Nazi Germany and then fought in World War II. I mean, just a very hard life, and worked in a factory. That's all he ever did for his life. But with that job, he got married. His wife, my grandmother, didn't work. He took care of 2 kids, owned a house, owned 2 cars, played poker on the weekends. Like you could take care of a wife and kids and have an identity and a life. Whereas today, even though they're much richer than that, what are your chances of owning a home, getting married, paying for the cost of education, healthcare? I'm saying there's no identity there. Is my point.
You're right on the surface. But you got to compare the life of a family in the 40s and 50s to the life of a family today. We have television, we have internet, we've got some of the greatest technology ever created, and we have to pay for those things that requires labor. As the population expands, we get more specialists and more access to better technology. We still have to pay for it all. Yeah. So sure, my dad, he was able to, he actually worked 2 jobs when I was younger, and his dad before him worked a single job, the greatest generation. But what did they have in their home? Many of them didn't have TVs. And so the kids would do chores, would go on, newspaper routes, and they would be doing some kind of work. So what's happening is we're saying today, these kids can't even own a house. Yes, you can. It's called in the middle of West Virginia, and it's a $30,000 house. You just don't want to live in it. So sure, there was suburban living when people didn't have the same access to utilities, when people didn't have access to the same medication. People today say, oh, we need universal health care because people can't go to the doctor. Dude, the medical care you can get on debt is 100 times better than medical care they were getting 100 years ago, or a couple hundred years ago when they were injecting people with mercury or whatever for syphilis. Nothing is stopping a person from taking their family and going and building a cabin in the middle of the woods, except, I guess, for the fear eventually that the federal government will wander off into the middle of Wyoming and be mad at you about it.
So I don't completely disagree with you. I think that the fact that we've become richer than ever before is a good thing. And I think the fact that we have luxury goods and consumer goods for cheaper than ever before, I think it's great. I mean, it's risen the standard of living. I guess it's just the fact that we've also, in this process, created through our elected politicians, this system where we've subsidized the cost of housing, subsidized the cost of education, subsidized the cost of healthcare to the point that they've all been tremendously inflated. And we've also just lost a sense of community and values, which I think also goes hand in hand with the government taking more and more of a participatory role in society. And I think this is just, again, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just a cocktail that's worked out to be what we see now.
People need to have a return to like normalcy and understanding of the world. What that means is, imagine life if you were just one day woke up in the middle of the woods bug naked. Congratulations, that's life. Everything we've built, I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say we. Every shoulder that is being stood upon by the giants is done for us. We woke up, I was in New York one day, and I was riding my bike over the Williamsburg Bridge, and I was like, wow. I never did anything to deserve this bridge to ride up and over this river. And I just imagine, I'm like, what it must have been like a couple hundred years ago when people were like waiting for the ferry they had to pay for to do it. And then some people said, I am going to plant this tree whose shade I know I will never sit beneath because in 50 years the children will be able to and their lives will be better. Today, people are now demanding and entitled of all of these things that were gifted to us that we never paid for. And so what happens is they say, I should be able to have a massive house, 5 bedrooms. I should be able to only have to work, a certain amount of time throughout the week so that I can have every luxury that this life can afford me. And it's like, nah, you're spoiled. I'm sorry, but it's true. If you had to go crash land on an island somewhere and then build a house out of coconuts or whatever, that's life.
Yeah.
We are living a gifted life from the people who came before us.
Yeah, you're so right. And what's interesting about that is that like kind of what you're getting at is that this idea of like the philosophical idea of UBI, right? Like we kind of already have that. I mean, like just in just a pure free market with no government giving you a UBI, you kind of already have this where just because we were born here in a first world country in 2021 and we're living, we do stand on the shoulders of all of these people. I mean, none of us really earned all of this technology that we get to speak through. I mean, you may have bought the microphones and stuff, but we didn't invent all of it. And we have all these things, like you were saying, with the bridge and the trees that other people have, made before us.
The bridge is a better example than the microphones because that's something you can just use without paying for.
Well, sure, but I'm just saying that even if you pay for this, someone else invented it, and we all benefit from the fact that other minds put in all of this labor to make all of this happen, and just the fact that we have this level of wealth around us. I mean, we could be the exact same people born in some third world country or on some desert island, and we don't get any of that. So that is our UBI. But to your other point about that, which I think is it's almost like the contradiction of the human experience, is that even though there's this kind of selfish impulse to go, well, no, we don't care about passing it on to the next generation. And you go like, well, look, all of this was passed on to you. So don't you have some obligation to pass it on to the next generation? But I'll tell you this, after having kids, it really, opened my eyes up to this, that it's actually a much more rewarding existence. You will be a much happier person when you are focused on passing something on to the next generation. That's like the beauty of life, that when you're living for others and thinking about what's been given to you and what you can give on to the next generation, that's when you don't want to go block a car in the street and throw a Molotov cocktail through the window because you've got something kind of bigger to live for.
They don't have kids.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And so you can be a person of empathy and community without having kids. If you so we as a society.
But it helps.
It absolutely
throws it in your face.
Yeah.
But so you have people who don't have family, don't have community. They create these nebulous online communities of disparate beliefs that make no sense. And then they're angry that they're not getting what they think they deserve. They're not working. They don't want to work. They want to make the government pay for it, extract the wealth out of the system to give to them, and they will get violent. It is what's the right way to describe it? It is
blasphemy.
No. It's a chaotic, destructive force like fire.
It's jealousy
that is burning at the foundation. It's a rot at the foundation of our society of people who think they're entitled to things but won't work for things.
What's happening?
And it's corrupting the foundations. And if we don't do something about it,
they think like they're helping by not having kids. That's what their argument is, because they think we're overpopulated.
I don't think that's true.
There's a lot of people who think
but
that.
that's a rationalization. I think.
Yeah,
exactly. So what I think is actually happening is they're extremely selfish. They want everyone to give to them. They don't understand what it means to give back, and so. As you mentioned, it's a rationalization. I'm doing this because, bad for the planet. Okay.
I think a lot of it is wealth disparity because we are super wealthy, all of us, but the disparity is greater than it's ever been. And if you've ever been poor in a room with a bunch of rich people and like you're having a great day, everyone's having a great time, you're all equals, then all of a sudden you're like, I got to go do some crap job I hate. And they're all like, I don't, because my dad was rich and I don't ever have to do anything. And the anger that you feel,
I don't
of jealousy, it's almost irrational anger.
Have you felt that?
Yeah,
I've never felt that.
Yeah, I felt like, why do I have to be the one that has to go work a low-paying job because my parents weren't rich when my friends don't have to work?
See, that's probably the Antifa
and they're all driving around in cars. Exactly,
and exactly because I didn't have that. So I grew up. Someone mentioned earlier, take a shot if Tim mentioned South Side of Chicago. Now's your chance. You just did. And so lot of crackheads, a lot of heroin addicts, a lot of poor people. And then I started, playing music, which, I went around to different venues, met different people in different areas, eventually met a bunch of rich kids. And I never cared. I don't care. I don't care about what that person is doing. It's a waste of my time to sit there and be like, why do they have money? I was like, their parents are rich, whatever. I'm going to focus on doing my thing. But you know what? Maybe I'm lucky enough to to be grounded in reality, to understand something really simple. Anybody listening, here's what you do. If you're in a big city, even today, stand in a street corner and say cheeseburger and look people in the eye and say cheeseburger. Eventually someone will come back and be like, I got your cheeseburger, buddy. I'm not kidding. It will work. I'm dead serious. You can go to any major city because people tend to be good and want to help.
Yeah.
And you can say to any random person, you help me buy a cheeseburger? But hold on.
You're right.
Go to Sub-Saharan Africa. Go to the Middle East. Go to Egypt and see what happens if you sit there and beg for this stuff. People are going to be like, is that a joke?
Yeah.
A lot of countries will help you out, for sure.
The essence of the point you're making, which is absolutely right, is that our crisis is not a true crisis of real poverty. That's not the issue.
Exactly.
Here. Like even our poor people, our rich people,
our homeless people are fat, bro.
Compared to other societies that have existed. So that's not the problem. And again, maybe this is just like the way I look at things since being a father. But when I look at somebody who's out on the streets, like one of these Antifa members, who's this little punk kid who's dressed in all black.
Some of them are in their 40s, bro.
Well, okay, fine. But he's still a punk kid in his 40s who will, the way they fight, where it's not even like someone like there's no honor in even being like, why don't we take this outside and fight? It's like they'll go talk shit and then someone stands up to them and they run away and then they look at the other guy and then they sucker punch him behind him and then they all pound on him when he's down. I look at that and go, who raised you?
Nobody.
Like who and what who were your parents who were responsible for instilling something into you?
The Federal Reserve.
Well, that's part of it, but there were real human beings who made this human being. And I'm just saying that we lost. It's not an issue of poverty. It's something different than that. It's like the soul of the culture. Like we lost this thing that
honor.
Honor and some type of social pressure to raise your damn children.
Like, so I was thinking about this the other day. Scruples are gone. People used to genuinely feel remorse if they stole or lied to somebody. It's great. Maybe I'm romanticizing the past, but community used to be like, I can't do that. Why? Well, because you can't do it. It's just like deep within your soul, you feel something you can't do. Scruples. Now it's like people are like, oh, I'll lie to whoever to get whatever I want. The moral foundation is being shattered.
Did you see? I saw someone was sharing this clip, like an old Alex Jones clip on Twitter today, where he's, it's like a classic Alex Jones clip where he's screaming like a maniac, but if you listen to what he's saying, he's actually making a pretty good point. Which is like 90% of Alex Jones. You're like, man, if you were just not yelling at me, I'd agree. But
or saying the frogs game.
It's like it was old. It was like it must have been like 15 years old. But he's talking about how he's like the kids are worshiping Justin Bieber.
Yes,
and they're worshiping.
Imagine.
And he goes, what about Magellan? Yeah. Magellan sailed around the world, and it's like
that is amazing.
He's screaming at you, but you're kind of like, I mean, he's making a good point.
Wait, my favorite. He's like, there were 200 men on that ship, and only 11 made it. And I'm like, calm down.
Like, dude, if you weren't pulling your hair out of your head, like, I'd say you're making a very logical point.
Wait.
But there's part of this, right? Like, there was no tradition and honor and like upbringing for children, and I'm just saying that I think a lot of times today, at least I get this a lot, that if you address any of these issues, people say they go, oh, you're like some social conservative right winger or something like this, and then the implication is almost one step away from like, well, you must hate gay people or hate trans people or hate black people or something like that. But we're not allowed to ever just go, and I feel this a lot more these days, but you just go like, you go on Instagram and see all the like, every girl's like in a thong and you're like, these values suck. This sucks as a culture to raise a daughter in. Like, this is not good.
Before we move too far, I have to make one point on your Alex Jones thing. You remember when he was talking about turning the frogs gay? Mm-hmm. That's like probably the most famous Alex Jones meme. He's yelling and he's like, they're turning the freaking frogs gay. And he like, pounds. Imagine if instead of that, you had Alex but no one had ever seen him before, right? It's the first time he'd ever appeared. He's wearing a tweed sweater or something or whatever. He's got like leather patches, and he's got a corncob pipe, and he's wearing glasses, and he goes, now, an interesting study came out about atrazine. It's a pesticide. And he's talking to other, glassist individuals. And he goes, the interesting thing about this atrazine is that it's disrupting the endocrine systems of amphibians, notably frogs, in many of these regions. Now, on the coasts, you can see that it's draining off into the oceans, having less of an impact on groundwater. But in the Middle East, it's a very serious problem. Dare I say, jokingly, they're turning the frogs gay. No, but in all seriousness, there would never be a meme. Well, it was right. Alex Jones yelling and slamming. They're turning the frogs gay.
That's the Trump phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like when everyone would be like, man, if he wasn't so brash and he didn't do all this, then maybe he could have gotten this done. And you're like, no, he'd never be there.
Right.
That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
That's the contradiction. Is he'd never be there if he hadn't. The reason Trump was president is because he was the guy who was willing to look at Jeb Bush and go, your brother lied us into war, and basically wink, wink, nod, nod, you can't pleasure your wife, was basically the measure. But that was basically what do you think low energy was really saying when he kept kept going, Jeb Bush, you're low energy? What was it like? What was the real implication of that?
Yeah,
but
he
right?
wasn't wrong, man.
And then
clap.
He clearly wasn't. That's why he won, because he was clearly dead right. And then even he could look at Hillary Clinton and go, yeah, nasty woman, and all these things. And that's part of why he won. But it was also his downfall, and that's the thing with Alex Jones, right? But there's a really important principle there. And from my perspective, and maybe this is my own libertarian bias, but I really do think that the government, the rise of the welfare state, the rise of big government in America, that they undermined all the bonds that used to hold people together, right? So instead of the welfare state, you would have communities, you would have churches, you would have neighborhoods, all of these bonds. And that as the state got more and more powerful, they destroyed all of these bonds intentionally, in the same way that the communists hate religion, because they hate anything that's a unifying force more powerful than the state.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.